All right, we're going to dive a little deeper into glycogen storage and sports performance and kind of how these things are worked out. So, what really helps or factors in when we're discussing storing glycogen in the muscles, right? So, we know it's going to help us like perform better as athletes. We know it's going to be important for us to perform high intensity exercise, right? Well, there's two real big things. One, just making sure like we're eating correctly, right? So, typical diet, maybe like moderately active, maybe not exercising vigorously, but doing something, right? We're looking at having 55 to 60% of our calories come from carbohydrates. Well, if you're an athlete and you need to perform well, right? You're looking at maybe getting into a higher carb diet, right? So I have it listed 60 to 70%. It could go upwards of 75. But just over 60% is really what we're looking at, is like making sure we're getting enough carbs in to restore our glycogen stores as they are depleted. The other part of this is your training. Like, it's well documented that if you train, right, so exercise, you are going to store more muscle glycogen. Okay, so let's look at glycogen storage in our diet, right? So study one over here to the left, you look at this and it says, they brought in a group of participants. All were relatively equal in their fitness level, right? They divvied them up into groups, and all they changed was the amount of carbohydrates that they were taking in on their diet plan, right? So one group was a low carb group, so about 25% of their diet, of their calories, came from carbs. A moderate group, so kind of in the normal range, 55 to 60%, and then a high carb group, which was 60 to 70%, over that 60% mark. And what they found was this, is that they took the low carb group, right? The fitness levels were generally the same, right? They put them on a treadmill, same speeds, right? The low carb group, they basically pooped out after an hour, right? The moderate group, they were able to sustain the exercise for 2 hours before they got too tired to continue, right? And then the high carb group was able to go for 3 hours. So what they ended up finding was that there was like a 3x or 3-time performance based on your intake of carbohydrates, right? So like what they were able to store in the body and use for exercise. There was a second study done, and what they did was put these people on like a 3-day exercise program and vigorous exercise. So they worked out hard. They had one group that had like a 40% or 40% of their carbs came from carbohydrates, and then another group that had 70%. And what they found was that 40% group, although able to perform the exercise, they didn't have their glycogen stores replenishing, right? So they weren't eating enough carbs to be able to sustain that exercise for a long period of time, right? So if you're exercising every day, eventually you're going to hit a wall and will not be able to perform. Meanwhile, the 70% group were able to perform, were able to recover, and were able to replenish those glycogen stores so that they were able to continue exercise moving along, right? So we know that the two factors are obviously our diet, and the other one is our training, right? So what they've kind of been able to tell, right, is just, measuring, is that untrained people are able to store 13 grams of glycogen per muscle unit, right? Meanwhile, trained athletes were able to store 32 grams of glycogen per muscle unit. And then they look at people that are highly trained and also go on high carb diets, right? So that over that 60% mark, and they found that they're able to store 35 to 40 grams of glycogen. So when you're looking at things and you're looking at like, hey, I'm an athlete, I want to perform at my best, right? I need my glycogen stores at peak performance, or maxed out, if you will, right? That highly trained, group that is eating a high carb diet is going to be more beneficial than not. Thank you.